Hi, Mr. Poilievre. Ezra
Yes.
Levant from Rebel News. You mentioned certain things that rise to the level of a crime, but there are many things that aren't quite at that level. For example, people marching, calling for an intifada, or using language that may not rise to the level of a criminal prosecution. And you've said before that you respect freedom of speech, even for odious views. But what about people who are not Canadian citizens, who are foreign nationals, perhaps here on a student visa to go to our schools, and instead of studying at university, they're participating in these hate marches, intimidating people, Jewish restaurants, calling for the death of Jews. Again, not criminal level, but these are foreign nationals. Would you support canceling the visas and deporting foreign nationals who, instead of doing what they came here to do, are spreading hate at these pro-Hamas rallies?
Thank you for your question. You raise a number of different issues. One, if someone comes here on a student visa and they're not actually a student, then on that basis alone, they should go home. We don't want to have, one of the problems we have with the student visa program is that it has been used as a fraudulent point of entry, particularly for corrupt employers trying to get labor from abroad. So in general, we believe that we should shut down all the fraud in the student visa program, and anyone who claims to come here to study that is not actually studying should not be here. With regards to protests, I do believe in freedom of speech. I believe people should be allowed to say things I disagree with, even things that I find appalling. That is the price of living in a free country. The alternative is to have state censors who then decide what kind of speech is acceptable and what is not, and then who chooses those state censors. And then those censors will pick and choose based on their own political views which speech is allowed and which speech is not. That's why I believe in freedom of expression. You mentioned, for example, if someone stands up and calls for violence against a particular group, they can, under the current criminal code, be charged with incitement. Those provisions already exist. And I would encourage law enforcement to make sure those provisions are upheld for any and all people who deliberately incite violence against an identifiable group, because that has been criminalized for many years. And anyone who is convicted of that, who is not a citizen, should obviously not be in Canada.
You know, I appreciate as far as he went, but he didn't go very far. I'm not talking just about a hate crime, which is a difficult crime to prosecute. It's very rare, and it does offend the notions of free speech. I'm talking not about violating free speech. I'm talking about people who come to Canada as guests, temporary guests, to be students or workers or whatever, people who do not have tenure here, who do not have a citizenship status, going to these hate marches. And if they were Canadian citizens, maybe you have to live with it, unless they do go to the point where they're threatening someone, actually doing a crime. But if they're foreign nationals, basically tourists who are allowed to stay a little longer to get a degree, why should they be allowed to go to these hate marches? I've seen a lot of these hate marches. They are overwhelmingly either new Canadians or people who aren't Canadian at all. So why should they be allowed to get on a plane, come here either temporarily as a tourist or saying they're students, and then vomit out anti-Semitic bigotry on our streets, terrifying and terrorizing actual Canadian citizens? So I think he wiggled out of that one a little bit, but I think we should keep at it. I think it's a fruitful line of questioning. So I was the only, there was a reporter from the Canadian Jewish News who asked a question about these hate rallies too, and it wasn't a particularly thoughtful question. Poilievre answered it very briefly, again, with freedom of speech answer. But there were about half a dozen other reporters there, CBC, CTV, Canadian Press, and I thought their questions were the most interesting part of the day. None of them had anything to do with what Poilievre was there to talk about. None of them had anything to do with security for Jewish community and as the Hamas front comes here. None of that. It was carbon tax questions. They were furious that Poilievre didn't want a carbon tax to be inserted in Canadian aid to Ukraine. They were so, why won't you allow a carbon tax in Ukraine? Like, it was crazy. There were some vendetta questions, or like it was just the questions were so bizarre. A couple of them were about the fact that Poilievre briefly said, as did many others, that the explosion of the border crossing at Niagara Falls looked like terrorism. And Poilievre was actually citing CTV. I want to show you, maybe you've seen this clip on social media, but you probably just saw the CPAC camera, which was fixed on Poilievre the whole time. I had my camera and I pointed it at the Canadian Press reporter. And so we did a new little video at it. I want to show you this. This wasn't quite apple orchard Pierre Poilievre, you know, when he had that apple and he was schooling that reporter in the Okanagan. But it was pretty close. And I think that Pierre Poilievre should carry an apple with him, maybe in his pocket. That might look a little bit funny to have a whole apple in your pocket, but maybe he should have an assistant nearby with an apple. And when a question like this comes, he should say, apple, and then an assistant who is an apple assistant, who does nothing else other than he or she carries the apple, waiting for the apple, and then the apple is run on to the, almost like, you know, in tennis matches, there's people who run to get the tennis ball super quick. It's really fun to watch those ball kids run and get the ball super quick. There's one job. Get someone with that kind of speed and attentiveness to be Pierre Poilievre's apple handler. And the moment you see a question like this, you're getting ready. The apple is taken out of the apple bag. You're getting ready. You're getting ready. You're looking at the boss. You're looking at the boss. You're waiting for the moment. And then he says, and maybe he doesn't even say it out loud. Maybe he just goes, maybe he just mouths it. And you say, oh, that's my cue. And you run with the apple, and Poilievre takes the apple, he takes a bite, and then he answers, and it goes like this.
Hi, Paula Lorigio with the Canadian Press. Et si vous pouviez répondre dans les deux langues officielles, je l'apprécierais beaucoup.
Do you think it was responsible for you to call yesterday's explosion by the checkpoint at the Rainbow Bridge terrorism when no U.S. or Canadian officials said that was or authorities said that was the case, and when the New York governor also said there was no evidence to suggest terrorism activity?
Actually, you're wrong. You're a CP? Okay, so CP, by the way, CP, just for everyone's knowledge, did have to make 3 corrections for falsehoods that they put into a single article. I think that might be unprecedented. I'm actually thinking about checking with the Guinness Book of World Records to see if there's ever been a news agency that has had to issue 3 corrections for patent falsehoods that they admit they had been made in one single article, and now you've made yet another falsehood in your question. Where you are wrong is that CTV reported that the government of Canada was presuming that the incident was terrorist. So, yeah, that's what I said in my remarks. You're right. It was a media report.
But it's citing media reports and not...
Which is what I said. In the House, I said there are media reports.
And you think that's a responsible thing to go on, to make that kind of a statement at the time without speaking?
What kind of statement?
Calling something terrorist.
I didn't. I said there were media reports.
That's the distinction we're making? Okay.
No, there's no distinction. What I said, and I was right, was that there were media reports of a terror-related event. By your admission, there were media reports of a terror-related event. And that media report, according to CTV, unless you're questioning their integrity now, came from security officials in the Trudeau government. So do you think the CTV was irresponsible in putting out that tweet?
Do you think it was a responsible comment to make in the House of Commons?
Sorry, I'm asking, I have already answered that. Do you think CTV was irresponsible to put that tweet out?
That's none of my business. That's not for me to comment.
Well, you just did comment. Okay. So, I just hope you're not going to print something that you have to apologize for again.
Okay.
I liked it. I mean, I was there for it. It wasn't as delicious, so to speak, as the original Apple moment, but I think, you know what? I think he should have a little Apple lapel pin or something. I don't know, like really little, that you sort of have to squint and say, what's that? Oh, it's just an apple. How do you like them apples?
David Menzies for Rebel News here in downtown Toronto, and I got to tell you folks, next March 23rd to 30th to be precise, we are going on a Caribbean cruise. Can you imagine that? And a lot of your favorite Rebels will be there, such as Sheila Gunn Reid. We got Alexa Lavoie, the big boss man himself, of course, he'll be there, Ezra Levant. And how about this? How about this for the cherry on the sundae? Tamara Leach, Canada's #1 freedom fighter. She'll be on that boat too. And look at the itinerary. We're going to be going to Half Moon Cay in the Bahamas, and then we're going to jazz it up in Ocho Rios, Jamaica, and then there's Georgetown in the Cayman Islands, and finally Cozumel, Mexico. Can you imagine that? If you want more details in terms of getting aboard the ship, go to rebelnewscruise.com. That's rebelnewscruise.com. All the details are there, the departure dates, the costs, and you know what? This is not just a fun-filled getaway. This is a way in which Rebel News raises some revenue. Unlike the mainstream media, we don't receive a nickel of government funding, nor would we take it if ever offered. So it's win-win. Enjoy yourself in the Caribbean and Mexico, and also support your favorite online news channel. So that's rebelnewscruise.com. I hope to see you aboard.